If humans' average lifespan was 1000 years, what jobs and businesses would there be that we don't have now? Personal historian. That's kind of the plot to K.S. Robinson's Ice Age. People live to be 600 or 100 years old. However, their memory is that of a normal human lifespan, like 80 years. So archaeologists and historians investigate events of the past only to realize that they lived through those events. I wonder what this ancient chest could be. Oh shit, it's my old toy box. What is this entity? Oh, it's the wank sock I lost when I was a teen. Oops. Edit, seriously. This is my first award and it's this. Multi-century investment schemes. Imagine investing in a moon base in 2100, then retiring to your moon mansion in 3000, because you're getting up there in years and your bones can't handle normal gravity all that well. Or investing in a Dyson swarm, because the ROI would be insane, and you could spare a few centuries to wait for your investment to mature. Retirement on the moon sounds fun. Depends on how progressed the colony is. If it has a functional ecosystem, economy, actual food, then it's fine. If not, you're gonna be eating a lot of nutrition cubes. Edit clarification. Interesting question. So much would be different. I imagine youth would be considered anything under 100 or something along those lines. Also, it might be normal to change careers throughout your lifetime. Also, how long would someone be viable? That is, at what point would they absolutely have to stop working for health reasons? Would they start to get dementia and other issues at 800? If so, that would greatly expand the elderly care industry. Conversely, if people make it to like 990 until they need help, then elderly services would be a very small industry. Family reunions would be huge though. I heard something a while back that some doctor had a theory that it would take around 400 years for our brains to become full. And after that your brain would start possibly forgetting things. And I always wondered, if that were true, when you were 1000 years old, would you even remember the first half of your life? I suppose so. Although I wonder how much useless stuff you could forget and never miss. There was something like that on Doctor Who. The doctor saves this little girl back in the 1st century or something like that, but whatever he did made her immortal. He runs into her far in the future, and at that point she doesn't even remember most of her life. She basically went from life to life, and as she went she forgot stuff in her past. Kind of sad. Immortality is sad as heck. I don't know, but companies would be like, you need 200 years of experience. Can you imagine having to work an entry-level job for 50 years? I think what would be considered entry-level would change, and the amount of time people were willing to spend training would increase dramatically. People would focus on self-improvement more. If you were going to live to 1000, spending 100 years in full-time education is not a terrible idea. People we think of as at the top of their field would be total noobs compared to people living 1000 years. Think you are good at something now. Imagine spending a couple of 100 years practicing. I think continuous education would be sufficiently more important. Think of how people over 70 struggle to keep up with modern computers. Now imagine more than half of adults were born before the modern concept of democracy. Good lord, imagine what the Supreme Court would look like. They would all be 900 plus years old. When 900 years old you reach, look this good you will not. Ed say school until you're 16. Work until you're 50, school from 50 to 66, work from 66 to 106, just keep rinse and repeating. It's the only way. I feel like when you are in your last 100 years you could probably stop with that shit. If we live for a 1000 years, there's no way people will be considered old enough to work at 16. Elder Scrolls 6 developer. 500-year mortgages. I guess houses would have to be made out of superwood or something. Longevity for everything would have to be better, so all our materials would have to be stronger. The mortgage would be for the land, not the house itself. growing replacement organs and body parts from one's own DNA to replace physically damaged ones. Or what? Your baby is so cute. How old is he? Almost 250 months now. I think I'll stop breastfeeding him in a couple hundred months from now. Memory services. Essentially you would hire people to meet up with you on occasion to go over the past week, month, year of your life, and they would write it all down for you so you could remember it. There would probably be tiers of service like daily writers to annual writers, and probably options of written memories to video memories. You could make a cool book out of this about a guy with this job that starts having mild psychosis and throughout time doesn't know what memories belong to him or his customers, and the entire thing is told from his ducked up point of view. I think population control would be a stated and accepted goal of every government, and there would be a massive state apparatus for determining who gets to have children and when. It would have to be. Imagine if the people born right after the Battle of Hastings were still alive, consuming resources. You couldn't let everyone breed at will. It would be every issue the modern world has with overpopulation, urban sprawl and pollution, but in overdrive. It depends on whether people remained fertile for much of their 1000 years or not. The title question just talks about the human lifespan, not about when menopause starts, and men don't stop being fertile in such a relatively sudden way, but their fertility steadily decreases with age anyway. If fertility remained as is, I could imagine humans not being considered fully adult until their first century or so. There would be a relatively small population of fertile individuals, tasked with little but reproduction and learning, and a much larger population of infertile individuals who mostly take care of the practicalities of keeping society running, sort of like you social insects, except not really. Come to think of it, it could be a good premise for a kinda pervy sci-fi story. I think risk aversion and risk prevention services would be a bigger industry. Okay, sure, you want to use a car, but that's too unsafe. You may die 400 years from your prime. Just walk instead. We can't hire you unless you have 200 years experience in a technology that's only existed for 100 years. The only thing that I think that would be different is that recycling businesses would be different in that they'd actually be recycling. If you knew you'd actually be around to see all the degradation to the environment, you'd actually change it. The effect is probably different for a person who is 500 years old and digs up a plastic container from his past and remembers throwing it out 400 years earlier. A Civil War veteran would be considered a young whippersnapper by the middle-aged founding fathers, who themselves would be regaled with stories about the good old days during the Crusades from the old men eating at Golden Corral. So my answer is buffets would certainly still be a thing. You'd consider trees to be pets, and there would be conversations like, I remember my first tree and you gotta look after it. A tree is for life, not just for a decade. Global warming would be something we'd control on purpose. We'd plan for a nice hot period 300 years from now and then bring it back, because who has the wardrobe for that weather all decade long? Am I right? But for jobs specifically, probably interplanetary bus driver. It will take 7 months to get to Mars. So for someone whose job is to shuttle people back and forth, they gotta live long. And 1000 years is probably a career of only 600 round trips. Surely spacecraft will be able to travel faster than that though. But I do see the economy being dictated by how much of one's life someone dedicates to their job. Of course, the rich don't do any work. We would be years back in technology because we'd still be stuck in superstitions that only died out because the people believing them did. The correct answer: technology and culture only advances with new ideas, and new ideas only comes with new and younger people. Old people get accustomed to things and ideas from their youth. I'd say that living 10 times more would hold us back 10 times more also. we would still be living in prehistory era. Power would accumulate even more with the old. You think boomers are insufferable now? Imagine someone with 500 more years to accumulate wealth. It's difficult to think about new things, but the number of marriages and divorces would definitely increase. But then you hear about that one old couple having their 700-year anniversary and go damn. Maybe true love does exist. God, some Asian couples will probably kill each other. Countries like India and Pakistan societally frown upon divorce nowadays more in villages and small towns and cities. Cities are becoming more accepting, so people will stay in marriages which they hate for hundreds of years. If they do divorce, they'll end up being shunned by their family for hundreds of years. People would definitely already leave the earth. The short lifespan is a big obstacle on having to fly to another solar systems, since it results in lots of other issues. Pretty sure planet well-being would be a lot more important, so you would have terraformer as a profession, and all the R&D towards changing back the climate effect would have a higher value. Collecting space trash, collecting the Pacific garbage patch, stuff like that. Also, space travel would get a huge boost. I wouldn't hire a person less than 300 years old, and then you have to work for minute wage for 100 years before you get a raise and a promotion. With a lifespan of 1000 years, I fear that I won't qualify for anything for the first few centuries. Teacher requirement 300 years experience, super duper master's degree in patience. Tolerance and brain deadness minimum 7 colleges you yeeted through with 3.5 GPA. Also, you get paid next to nothing due to inflation over the course of centuries. For these 1000 year lives must be fun too. That Japanese 1000-year-old construction company would probably be a lot more famous. It's questions like this that make me angry. There are super smart people that have helped humanity progress so much in a short life. Could you imagine what they could have done with more than 10 times the amount of time? What could a normal person do in that time? But I bet that, because our perception of time would be different, there wouldn't a big of change. Mental trauma therapy. 1000 years is a lot longer than 70, 80, meaning more stuff happening to people. Interesting that you say the average lifespan is 1000 years. That means some people will live to 2000 years or more. Education would last longer. Right now Americans are normally in school until they're 17 or 18, and college for 4 years or more beyond that. Other countries are similar. Those numbers would at least double. Similarly, age to vote and drink and possibly drive would rise. Nobody younger than 30, maybe 50, would be taken seriously when they voiced an opinion on serious topics. Ancient history would be something you could interview seniors about. Imagine asking someone what it was like being the son of a Roman legionary for your history paper and recording the answer on your cell phone. Regarding the actual question, I think environmental sciences would be more advanced. Pollution and environmental change happen too slowly to notice day to day. By the time you're old enough to notice that the forests you grew up near are gone, or other changes, you're probably approaching retirement, if not death. But if you can live 1000 years, you'd notice these changes just when you're getting out of college, which is right when most people's mindsets are most given to making a mark, changing the world, and joining activist causes. They'd still have centuries to look forward to, and they'd notice the trends and work very hard to keep them in check. Perhaps it's just wishful thinking, but I think businesses that clean up the environment would be a significant sector of the work economy, and would face much less resistance by the old guard than they do in the real world. At the same time, certain old industries would be slower to go away. You would be able to find blacksmiths out there even in 2021, for instance, and they wouldn't be artists or accretionists. They'd be catering to a dwindling customer base. But there'd be folk out there who never wanted to learn to drive one of those newfangled automobiles. And I'm sure other trades would fade away slower than they did in the real world as well. We'd probably have killed ourselves off already. A lot more suicides. That honestly sounds a bit like the movie In Time. I imagine it would be dystopian paradise with a lot of commercial slave labor and very strict control on who can be born or have kids for those who are part of society. Think about it. 1,000-year lifespan is a very long time for someone to die naturally. So the elite will exploit everyone's time to the fullest, or control the lifespan in an artificial way. My thought is just about all the craftsmen and artisans who would have hundreds of years to master a craft. Just think about how nice a pair of shoes from a 700-year-old cobbler would be.